joining us today. I think this is a really important topic to discuss. It's always important for our state, and I think it's particularly important today, and the COVID crisis has really brought it to the fore. Just as we get started, it could especially be important because of the technical ways we're having to do this. If everybody could please mute their phone when they're not speaking, it'll help us with background noise, and it'll help everybody hear, and it'll help everybody be heard. So because their phone won't be interrupted when they're speaking. So my name's Shane Burgess. I'm the Vice President for Agriculture, Life, Veterinary Science and Cooperative Extension at the University of Arizona. I'm also the Dean of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at the University of Arizona. So we have a very important title today. It's Arizona's Food System, a response to COVID-19. Lessons learned while feeding our state during crisis. I think there's so many messages in that title, but one of the things I want to ask you to think about, please, while you are listening to our panelists answer the questions, is that it uses the word system in the title, and a system is really important to understand. There are really two kinds of systems. I'd like to ask you to think about two things, and that's what I'm going to be thinking about while I listen to our presenters today. We have complicated systems, and many people would think our system is complicated. It is complicated, but it's not only complicated. The thing about a complicated system is for every output of the system, there's a proportionate input. So you put 1 unit in, you get 1 unit out. You hire a person, you get one person's labor out. It's a linear response. But the thing about our food system, which is more important, is it's a complex system. The thing about complex systems is the outputs are not often proportional to the inputs. And that means the outputs can be bad outputs or the outputs can be good outputs. And so we tweak one little thing, we may have a disproportionately good output. We tweak one little thing and we may have a disproportionately bad output. The system may collapse. And then we call that a nonlinear system. I think you'll find as you listen to our speakers today, we're dealing with a nonlinear system, an incredibly complex system. It's very hard to get your head around complex systems. And every time you think about one thing, you think about 10 other things that could be involved. And the trick is to find those key areas that can have a huge positive output and hopefully avoid stumbling on those key areas where you tweak one thing and the whole system collapses. And that's what I think is so important and so interesting about the panelists we have today. In a minute, I'll introduce the panelists, and what we're going to do is we're going to start, as the food system does, with the consumer pull. We're going to start with the fork and take chronological steps back towards the farm. And so with that, I'm going to introduce our 6 panelists today. Our first panelist is Barry Kraft. Barry is the Vice President of Marketing, Merchandising and Procurement at Bash's Family Stores. He's an accomplished supermarket veteran with 40 years experience and a background in merchandising, marketing, and category management. Our next panelist is Charlene Badman. She's the chef and owner of FNB. And Charlene won the 2019 James Beard Award and runs one of the best restaurants in Arizona. It's called FNB. But her heart is in her garden. She's also the founder of Blue Watermelon, a grassroots group of chefs, restaurateurs, farmers, and community food advocates that believe in everyone having access to healthy and good food. The next panelist is Billy Atul, and he is Senior Management and Operations for their family farm, founded in 1979 by Willie and Lynn Atul. The Atul family delivers the freshest and highest quality produce, dairy, eggs, and dry goods to casual and fine dining establishments, multi-unit chains, school districts, hospital networks, and senior care facilities throughout Arizona. Then we have Scott Vanderveld. Scott is an importer and distributor of Mexican fruits and vegetables in Nogales, Arizona. He's also chairman of the board of the Fresh Produce Association of the Americas, which represents produce importers and allied industries located in southern Arizona, as well as other states. Of course, Scott represents our international connection very directly on this panel. And then we have Arnot Duncan. Arnot is the CEO of Duncan Family Farms. He's a fourth generation Arizona farmer, and he's one of the leading organic growers in the United States, with products that are shipped across North America into Canada and over into the United Kingdom. And last but certainly not least, we have Stephanie Smallhouse, who is co-owner of Reddington Livestock. So Stephanie and her husband Andrew own and operate the Carlink Ranch, fifth generation ranching and farming operation in southeastern Arizona. Stephanie is also the current president of Arizona Farm Bureau Federation and a board member of the American Farm Bureau Federation. Stephanie is also the first female president of Arizona's Farm Bureau. And just before we get started, and I kick off and just ask I'm just going to kick off by asking the panelists to just give us a first opening statement of just a couple of minutes each, and then we'll roll into questions for the panelists. And just before we do, I want to thank the people who are putting on this event today. That is American Farm Bureau Federation, Local First Arizona, and Squire Patton Boggs. So if I could just, firstly, I'll call on each of the panelists and ask you just for a quick opening statement about the panel we're having today, about Arizona's food system response to COVID-19, and just a quick overview in a sentence or two about the lessons you've learned while feeding our state during this crisis, and then we'll go into more detail later on. So I'll just call on you first, Barry.
Good morning. Just a sound check. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Barry.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Well, good morning. It is good to be with you. I will start off by saying that these have been some of the most trying times. Actually, it's been the most trying times ever in my 40-year career in the supermarket industry. Everything that we thought we knew and everything that we've been trained to do over the years completely went out the window for the last 3 months, especially when this hit us in mid-March. The entire supply chain for the United States has been disrupted, and we probably won't see it really kind of straighten out and right itself for at least 6 more months in many of the categories that we've been in. Unlike many businesses, we didn't get the opportunity to shut down for a little while and kind of hit the reset button and figure out what we were going to do. Our industry really had to just continue on the fly, figuring out every single day, and sometimes multiple times per day, how we were going to handle these situations. I think as most part, through all of the information sharing that we've done with other supermarket companies, we've handled this pretty much the best that we possibly can. And I'm extremely proud to work with the team of people that we have here at Basha's family of stores that covers not only our Basha stores, but Food City and AJ's as well, in order to best serve the community. So again, thank you for having us on the call today.
Barry, thank you. I think you just defined what a complex system is from your perspective. Charlene.
Good morning. I'll just make sure you can hear me too. I'm on the phone.
Gotcha.
Yes. Okay. Well, first of all, I would like to say, I appreciate you having me on today. I also like to describe myself as pretty much I cook for a living. For the last 32 years, that's exactly what I was doing until March 14th, when we closed F&B as a result of COVID-19. Through this pandemic, I've been given the opportunity to still reach the consumer through local collaborations like Noble Bread, a sandwich featuring produce from McClendon Select, or a pasta sauce using 200 pounds of local summer squash at $1 a pound, paired with a pasta from Sonoran Pasta Company, which they support a local grain farmer and a miller, and returning to me $930 that I was able to continue to support my staff by covering their health insurance while we've been closed. Selling ground beef from Vera Earl Ranch in Sonoita to virtually teach an Arizona wine class how to cook a hamburger. I also, along with other chefs in the Valley, have added recipes to Churchill's CSA Chef Box to encourage home cooks to become more comfortable with Arizona produce in their own kitchens. I've also had the opportunity, though, to see collaborations with farmers and producers together working to support one another and bring some visibility to the consumer that normally would not have happened. Say a cheesemaker or a bread maker I think in particular, somebody like Wendell Crowe having his 4-ounce containers of goat cheese added to CSA boxes or a farm store stand shelf in order to continue to have his product out there for consumers. While we push to support our community of farmers, producers, and winemakers, we need to recognize the challenges that it brings. If a farmer is working 4 times as hard to produce a CSA box at half of the profit it would be usually making by selling to our restaurants, this shows that there's a problem with our system and the system is broken. My own experience of reopening for takeout just in the last 3 weeks has brought to me tired produce or my request for specialty vegetables. In particular, I have gill feather rutabagas that are grown for me every year, but unfortunately they rotted in the ground because of labor shortages. And I've also had delays in receiving certain crops because they were either not planted or they were planted later because of fear of not having the market to sell them. This demonstrates the state of the small-scale agricultural within a pandemic, which some have perceived as being successful. Farmers and chefs have had to turn to other states to bridge the gap that traditionally we would have covered by our local market in order to keep the interest of the consumer. I'm speaking of my own experience as well. I believe that it's unfortunate that it's taken a pandemic to bring people and businesses to understand what is going on in their own backyard here in Arizona. Right now, we are just hobbling along and we will not be able to continue. We need to take this opportunity to work on infrastructure and sustainability for our farmers, our producers, and our ranchers to continue to produce and make a viable living to sustain Arizona. We need to continue to have the consumer engaged and support our local businesses, and this can only happen if we work together. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. As a chef, I always want to be sure my work is purposeful, and I hope today we can come together to advocate for a better food system in Arizona. Thank you.
Charlene, thank you very much. And again, I think you've talked a lot to another part of what complex systems are all about, and that is they require very rapid innovations, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't, and complex systems, once they fall apart, are very, very hard to put back together again without clear planning. And really, thank you so much. And I will say, I don't know if anybody else was salivating while you were at the beginning of what you were saying, but I'm just dreaming up all these things I need to have for lunch now, thanks to you. So Charlene, thank you for that introduction. Billy, I'd like to pass it over to you, please.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, excellent. So good morning. Thank you for having me as well. We are a distributor here in Arizona. We have been in business for 41 years this year. Like everyone has mentioned, and I'm sure everyone will continue to mention, the coronavirus COVID crisis pandemic has just completely uprooted everything that we have done. You know, traditionally, we have always serviced restaurants and school districts, hospitals, hotels, things of that nature. And in a matter of a day or two, our entire business model was uprooted immediately. Kind of speaking to what Charlene said, the disruption level, it was just great and immediate and shocking. We have, slowly but surely been rebounding and certainly learned a number of lessons. But what we've seen a demand for as distributors more than ever is the public coming to us in a way they haven't before, saying, we need food, we need help, we need assistance. How do we keep this going? We have been blessed to be a recipient of the USDA's food box grant. So we are doing part of their Farmers to Families food box program, serving community food banks and doing everything we can to support the Arizona economy and support local growers and things of that nature during this time. But it's undoubtedly been a huge challenge. And I think, echoing what Charlene said earlier, certainly infrastructure changes will need to result as of this for us to keep going in this capacity. So I look forward to it today, and thank you again for having me.
Great. Thank you, Billy. You finished off with some really important point about the fact that infrastructure is so important, and I think everyone should remember that infrastructure is hardware, but it's people. Hardware could mean roads as well, but it's people, but it's hardware, people, and it's also cyber, the computing infrastructure that we all need. That counts as infrastructure too. Scott, I'll pass it over to you, please. Scott, are you there? Can we hear you? Can you hear us? Okay, well, Scott, I'll come back to Scott. Seems to be a problem with the connection with Scott. Arnot, I can pass it over to you, please.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. This is Arnot Duncan. As Shane identified earlier, I'm a fourth-generation farmer. Actually, kind of grew up farming in South Phoenix from about, southern baseline area from about 48th Street to 43rd Avenue. And my dad's side of the family actually homesteaded the southwest corner of 7th Avenue and Southern in Phoenix. So we do consider ourselves to be local growers. Anyway, we farm presently. We're planting around anywhere around 6,000 to 8,000 acres in Arizona, California, Oregon, and we were farming up until a month ago in New York, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But our primary product, we're 100% organic, and we grow the little baby salad components you see labeled, baby spinach, baby arugula, and spring mix. And we sell to all the primary processors throughout the U.S. Who deliver our products to, and we deliver our products across the U.S. and Canada and at times to the U.K. And so that was, we didn't used to be just in Arizona. Enjoyed that until my boys grew up and moved out of the house, and that gave me a little bit more time and focus to expand into meeting the needs of our buyers who were saying we needed to be 52 weeks. We've learned a lot in this entire event, shall we say, continued event, extended event. And I think that if we've learned anything in our business, it's that you need to remain flexible and be willing to change everything. And we're willing to talk about some of those things as we move through this presentation. Thanks, everybody, and once again, good morning.
Thanks, Arnot. I think you make a really good point about being willing to change everything. That's another example of complexity over just a complicated system. Scott, I want to return to you if we're able. Okay, I think we may have lost Scott. I'm sure that friends at Farm Bureau are trying to track Scott down right now. Stephanie, if we could go over to you, please.
Sure, I'll jump in there if I can unmute myself, which I think I have. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Stephanie.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to say, that this is such an interesting opportunity to hear from all of these different sectors within the food system. And I am sure I'm going to learn a ton today from hearing those different perspectives, as most of the time I'm at the farm gate level. But I thought I would open up just by talking mostly about just the general agricultural system in Arizona and the Farm Bureau response to COVID, and then go into more details as we work through the questions. So I think first I'll say that we're super fortunate in Arizona to basically have the climate that allows us to grow food products and fiber products year round. But we also basically have a dual agricultural food system in Arizona. We have a fairly robust local food system, and we also have a very robust commercial food system. And, Arnot is an example of our very diverse growers in Arizona who is able to participate in both of those food systems. And so that makes Arizona, I think, uniquely situated, not only in how we responded, but how we can respond in the future. In terms of the Arizona Farm Bureau response, really what hit us first was the needs of our direct sale growers, those folks who sell at farmers markets, sell directly to restaurants, participate in local foodie events. We knew that they were going to be hit immediately and drastically. The next thing that we faced were addressing labor supply issues. With the closing of the borders and movement not going back and forth, we were forced with being very strong in our message to the administration and to lawmakers that we could not see a disruption of that labor supply, especially for our produce growers who were in the midst of a lettuce harvest. Next, what we ran into were trying to keep those farmers markets open, recognizing that direct sales growers were facing a huge challenge with getting their product, much of which is perishable, to consumers and being able to stay in business. And so we worked very rigorously with the governor's office in trying to make sure that farmers markets could stay open with certain precautions taken. We jumped in for wine growers in the fact that I think over 75% of their income comes from wine tasting rooms and sales that happen there. And so we wanted to look at that and see what we could do about those folks. Food bank connections. We knew that we had perishable items that were basically rotting in the field, and we had a lot of people that were instantly out of work. And we also had a consumer disruption in the grocery stores in terms of supply. So very quick attention to trying to figure out what to do about the food bank connections. Basically, COVID-19 was not an issue in terms of, as Dean Burgess says, it's a linear system, it's very complicated. But if you think about it, the drastic changes that had to be made and the disruptions that were made at the farm gate weren't because of supply of food substance. We have plenty of that. It was sudden change in consumer habits, which we had never seen before so quickly and so drastically. And the fact that our food system is so carefully synchronized from the farm gate to the grocery store or the restaurant. And the fact that 50% of sales for most farmers, whether they were local or commercial, mostly commercial, immediately stopped in terms of demand for their product because of restaurant and retail closures and schools. And so trying to get a message to the public to try and maintain your normal eating habits that you normally would have, you just might have to go about it a different way, was an important message for us to get out to the public. And then I'll just touch on the last two things. Obviously, those consumer habits, changes in consumer habits drastically impacted our supply in terms of having to dump supplies. So you saw this juxtaposition in the media of dairies dumping millions of gallons of milk while there were there was basically lines of cars around food banks trying to get food. And so we have to deal with that and address that. And I'll be interested to hear from the others on the panel about how we can address that system at that level. And then we had, specific to Arizona, we don't grow much poultry or pork here. We have some pork, but we didn't see the disruptions in Arizona that they saw in the South or the Midwest, but specifically with livestock issues. We then transitioned from labor issues in terms of supply to labor issues in terms of worker safety. And so looking at how we can protect and keep workers healthy, but still keep essential businesses open like packing plants became a huge challenge. And we will be facing the backup of beef in the livestock system for probably several more months, maybe to the end of the year. And so that's obviously going to impact our beef growers. And then lastly, just ensuring that that agriculture was accounted for in the federal programs for the payroll protection plan and the different grants and things that went out. A lot of times agriculture works so differently as an industry by itself that programs like that aren't necessarily written to include agriculture. So in the beginning, we had a lot of producers that weren't able to take advantage of those programs to keep their labor and their workers going. So all of those made for a full plate of things that we needed to address in very few weeks.
I've always wondered how you keep everything juggled, Stephanie, and now I'm glad you're able to, because it's prepared your brain for all these different things coming in all these different times. I think you make a really good point. I mean, the whole thing has been driven by complex human behavior, and I think you heard in the introduction that every one of our panelists is part of this complex, interdependent network Stephanie, you made a really great point about local and international food supply from Arizona, and also I think you made a good point about fiber, this complex human behavior. Who knew there'd be a run on toilet paper? And now we've got a run on face masks, and so I'm hoping for our cotton industry. Cotton is mentioned if you go into the biomedical literature. I've never seen the word cotton mentioned, and human health and so many links before. So I'm hoping to see our cotton industry take a big advantage of the face mask boom that we're about to see worldwide. I just want to cycle back to Scott. Scott, have you managed to join us again or rejoin us?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Great, Scott. Glad you're here. Hopefully it wasn't just that we weren't able to hear you and you were frustrated trying to speak. But Scott, are you able to give us a quick 1 or 2 minute overview of where you're sitting in this complex network and what you've experienced over the last 3 months?
Of course. From our perspective here in Southern Arizona as importers of Mexican fruits and vegetables, we've been watching this entire situation play out. As warehousers, as distributors, we began trying to prepare for it in February and March, changing protocol here for the use. We have a cluster of warehouses where imports come in and are redistributed from. Adjusting our protocols here in the warehousing industry, the essential use of personal protective equipment, mandatory, the restriction of visitors, even at times causing us to question how we interact with truck drivers, for instance, for signing bills of lading. All that became a very important part of how we tried to keep our employees safe and our community safe. It's been a very difficult process. We learn day to day. Obviously, on the supply side, with the fruits and vegetables that are being grown in Mexico, as we experienced the reduction of the food service industry, many of those items were not able to be packed and shipped. So we felt that from that end, and a significant reduction in volumes. We also experienced issues related to inspections from federal and state agencies. In the first few days of April, we had an inspection program go into place on Mexican tomatoes, where approximately 93% of all tomatoes had to be inspected. So then now, in the peak period of our table grape industry, our table grape season, May and June, where we see large volumes of table grapes to supply a niche window in the North American season, and that also requires 100% inspection for USDA grading purposes. So as we balance not only our own crews and employees, but at the same time federal and state inspectors circulating within the town, it really caused us to look inward and analyze our own processes and use our best judgment to protect our employees and our community. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Scott. I think there's so many takeaways from that too, and of course you're uniquely placed within the international perspective. I think just everybody on the call, you just found out why I have the best job in Arizona. I get to race around and be exposed to all of these different parts of the diversity of our really complicated and complex food system. I'm going to do something that we actually didn't talk about when we prepped for this, because I've had the advantage that I get to just comment on everybody's intro. I'd just like to run through one by one, just a very quick 1 or 2 statement takeaway from what you've heard from the other panelists before we roll into the questions. Just, I'm sure you'll be thinking, yeah, I think that too, or no, Shane doesn't know what he's talking about. So, Barry, just a very quick takeaway from what you heard from the other panelists, please. Barry, are you there? Okay, we'll move on to Charlene. Charlene, quick takeaway from what you heard from the others?
Of course, listening to Billy and what he was saying about not selling to restaurants and having to change over, everybody having to do that, having to make the changes that we've all had to do, that we all experienced some way of having to move and adjust. Arnot mentioned, every single one of us mentioned that we've had to adjust how we are doing business in order to somehow continue. That was a big part of what I was thinking. So just to hear that everybody in their individual kind of part of what's going on with our food system is feeling the same sort of things that I am. You know, just makes it more powerful that, you know, I'm not just the one that's feeling this. I mean, I already know that because I deal so much and I'm so close with farmers and other small businesses. But to see that from large to small, that the impact, you know, is just the same.
Great, thank you, Charlene. Billy, quick takeaway?
I mean, all of what everyone has said makes sense to me for their own area of the supply chain. So none of this is really a surprise to me. What it really speaks to me is the need for a synchronization of efforts across the chain to ensure that wherever we end up after this and future actions after this, we really work with each other to ensure that it is sustainable for everyone across the board. Sometimes, and I am guilty of this myself, we get tunnel vision and we only kind of think about our lane. What has surprised me in a sense, but also been eye-opening at the same time, I guess, is the universality of the challenges we have faced in this crisis and the need to act cohesively moving forward to recover and come out on the other side of this in a stronger position.
Great, thank you. Barry, are you there? I'm going to cycle back to you.
Yes, I am. I'm here now. And when I unmute, I'll try not to hang up the phone in the future.
I've done that before. Barry, so very quick takeaway from what you heard from the others at the introduction.
Quick takeaway is that everyone has gone through some extreme struggles, things that they've never gone through in their lifetimes in their industries. But the thing that comes out of this for me is that everybody's willing to work together to make ourselves more successful in the future. But I think we are going to come out of this much stronger in the end.
Right. Scott.
Yes, thank you. Well, I did note on Barry's initial statement, the supply chain will take approximately 6 months to reset. That's one of the big questions that we've been asking ourselves from our perspective here as importers and distributors is, when will we find ourselves in a new setting that has some degree of certainty to it about how the entire chain will reset and play out? Obviously, we're focused on the reactivation of the food service industry. As restaurants begin to open up, how will that demand and pull manifest itself? And at the same time, another important part, commercial kitchens and especially school districts. We're watching those carefully. If there are disruptions to the school cycle, especially starting up in late summer and fall, that's really going to change our mentality and our way of operating, because they do form such an important part of the chain itself. Those are my thoughts.
Great, thanks. Arnot, quick takeaway from what you heard from the others?
Yeah, I'd like to just kind of shine a little bit brighter light on what both Charlene and Steffi, well, everybody talked about, was the significance and importance of a local system in addition to the national and international abilities to deliver product. Look how important it has been, or still it has been, for growers of all sizes to deliver back into or stay in the Arizona market. I think it's incredible that Arizona has so many strong small growers who are looking to deliver and work within that very localized system, and yet at the same time have some of the largest growers in the country who are delivering product at the highest levels. The leafy greens market, as you know, is 80 to 90% out of Arizona delivering to the United States and Canada. I just think that and understand, qualify everything I'm about to say or throughout this entire meeting, but I love small farms. Huge supporter of small farms and farms of all sizes. And I think we have found through this event how important farms of all sizes are to the system that Shane alluded to earlier, and everyone plays a part in. And I think it'll be really interesting to hear everybody talk about these different aspects of Arizona production and the delivery systems as well. Thanks, Shane.
So I think that's a really interesting observation, Arnot. So it turns out that if you look at every single successful, robust, complex system, they all have exactly what you said, Arnot. They all have components of different sizes. and different connectivity, and that provides their robustness. And I think that's a very important thing, lesson from this. Stephanie, quick takeaway.
Well, I think, you know, what hits me in listening to all the different players in the system, basically all the different levels, is the fact that, you know, in agriculture, we are largely, basically, we're like many industries, really, we're largely reactive to the consumer, right? In many senses, you know, we're producing based on what the demand of the consumer is. And so I think that this whole situation has shined a light to all levels within the food system of how quickly that consumer choice can change, but how we can find opportunities to make certain portions of the food system stronger. For instance, you know, when we were talking about, you know, restaurant services and things that were happening, Charlene mentioned, you know, labor. And, you know, and that's something that I'm probably going to touch on a few times today, and the fact that it's very a local food system is very labor intensive, which for all levels involved. And I think that, you know, that's one of the reasons that so many farms have become so specialized, and why so much of our system is very synchronized due to that specialization. And so I think that moving into the future, when we consider the challenges with labor and specialized system, that just recognizing how each level in the chain can make adjustments to look for those opportunities to expand upon the things that we saw coming from the consumers during this period of months in terms of where their priorities are.
Great, thank you. You know, I could keep going round and round in circles with you guys, I know, but I also know I've been given some specific questions that we need to ask. Just to keep in mind, everybody, we are running until 10 o'clock today, so we have an hour and 10 minutes, and we have 7 key questions, and we have 6 speakers, so that's 42 separate speaking events in an hour and 10 minutes. So everybody, as you think about these questions, just remember we've got a lot to get through over a short time. So first question, and I'm going to be asking this of everybody, but first question is going to go to you, Barry, starting with the consumer poll. What are the barriers to the future of Arizona agriculture that must be overcome to protect and expand Arizona agriculture for communities of 2050?
I've had the opportunity to be in the state of Arizona now for just a little over a year, and I came from a couple of states away from the great state of Texas. And even though I've been in this industry for 40 years now, I find that some things don't change. We took great pride in the state of Texas, and as I have also realized here in the state of Arizona, where especially for a local retailer to a regional retailer to work very closely with the different agricultural companies, the farmers, the people who are even on this call. And even though we do our absolute best to buy Arizona first, we still sometimes have to go out of state because of the lack of supply. I think, you know, in order for us to continue to protect the agriculture community for 2050, I think it's going to be imperative for us to work even much closer together from a retailer perspective, and working with the different farms and people who are represented on this call. We're in the process of doing that right now with actually some cattle growers from the state of Arizona. They're somewhat inexperienced in working with retail chains. So what we're doing is dedicating the resources to go to their facilities to help them to put the processes in place so that we can work together much closer with them. And actually, we open ourselves up to do that across multiple categories, whether we're talking about produce or whether we're talking about fresh beef, pork, whatever. We've got a team of experts that can go sit down and work with any of these farms and work with any of these growers in order to put the processes in place for us to continue to work together stronger. And as I said earlier, even though we attempt to buy Arizona first, we want to do more of that in the future. But I think it'll be imperative for us to all continue to come together. And, you know, for everyone that's on this call, please feel free to call on me because I've got a team of people who are ready to sit down with anyone here to continue to put the processes in place to make business easier in the future.
Great, thank you, Barry. Charlene? And any panelists who needs me to, just ask me to repeat the question. It's a long way through this panel, so, but Charlene, are you ready to answer the question?
As far as barriers in the future of our Arizona agriculture and what it looks like in 2050, I mean, I'm going to probably answer most of these questions with the same one, and Stephanie's already touched on it, but labor is the biggest part of it that I see, whether it's in my business, but also how my product is getting to my restaurant and onto the plate for the consumer. And then also space. I think for our farmers that we are really, in Arizona, we really are moving so many of our farmers, especially our small ones, out and giving them a lot less space to be able to produce, and without thinking about the consequences that we're not going to have, if they're not going to have this space in order to continue farming. I think that's something we need to be really looking at seriously and strongly, that we're taking away the opportunity that they have in their business and replacing it either with businesses and homes and things like that that are not going to be producing food for us. So those are my thoughts on the first question.
Great, thank you, Charlene. Billy?
Yeah, I'm going to echo what both said. From our perspective, labor is a huge concern. You know, how do you get product from point A as the farm to point B to us to point C as the ultimate end user? We struggle with that greatly right now, as I think everyone else does, given the different labor markets. So that's been a challenge. Things we also see, I wouldn't say these would be concerns by any means, but to way to continue is to really continue to push and promote proper food safety practices. That also labor is a component of that, ensuring that we are, as Arizona growers, farmers, distributors, all really holding the line with top of the line food safety, ensuring that the product that is grown and produced. And I know, I'm sure from Duncan, Arnot can talk about this, they have an incredible commitment to food safety and those tenants. And I think continuing to push that with our teams here and really aligning that with labor and with higher efficiencies and practices are vital for us to continue and to really kind of develop into a market leader.
Great, thank you so much. Scott?
Yes, thank you. We operated under NAFTA since 1994, and the USMCA is set to go into effect here on July 1st. So just a couple weeks away. Looking ahead in the next few decades, I think it's very important to ensure that we have a strong and secure and efficient trade relationship with Mexico, not only for legal visitors and crossers, but also for commercial goods going north and south. So the integrity of that trade agreement is going to be crucial for the relationship between Arizona and Mexico from the perspective of the importing community. We've gone through a somewhat tumultuous time here in the last 2 or 3 years as the USMCA went through its different rounds of negotiation, and we're excited to have a finalized system in place on July 1st. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Scott. Arnot?
I don't even know where to begin on this. So I'm really proud of what Arizona producers did as far as stepping up. The large growers continued to, especially in the leafy greens industry, continue to deliver throughout the. Well, we're still delivering, even though the demand diminished significantly. We had to destroy product. Everybody kept going. Our food safety systems allowed us to move very easily into extended and extensive farm safety systems to help keep all of our employees and our receivers safe. I think Arizona is really where everybody's going to have to look at diversified sizes of farming, diversified buyers for all of our products, By that I mean a nice balance of retail and food service, so that we've got some friends who are, I'll be interested to see if they're able to stay in business, because they were mostly food service, and that got shut down so hard that it was difficult for them to turn on a dime and start delivering their product to other venues and other directions. Food bank systems really need our help as far as how to work within a system that's delivering fresh product to them at a time right now where they have fewer and fewer opportunities for volunteers to come in. They've done a great job, but we really need to look at some of those systems and see how we can help deliver fresh product instead of everything only being packaged. Goodness, there's, the labor, everybody's touched on the labor. I can't tell you how important having adequate labor during all times of production, regardless of the situation, how important that is. And as we go through the question and answers, we can certainly touch on those specifically. But anyway, I think you get an idea as to where I'm coming from. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Stephanie.
Yeah, I can be fairly brief in the fact that I think that agricultural sustainability in Arizona lies largely on the availability of water. Right now, whether it's surface water or groundwater, it has been very difficult to get the message out to the general public in the state in terms of, what do you want Arizona to look like 20, or it says here 2050, so that's 30 years from now. Do we want Arizona to be a destination tourism state that's largely dependent upon everyone else for a local food supply? So when we enter situations like this, we're even more stressed. We need to recognize agriculture as a priority use for water. And so I would say that's at the tip top of my list is if you don't have water, then you can't grow anything. And if you can't grow anything, then everything else falls to the wayside. So that's both surface water management and groundwater management. And tagged on to the groundwater management, I would say the health of rural communities around Arizona. At some point, those rural communities are going to be where we need to focus our agricultural production, given the pressures that were previously, Charlene mentioned, on growers in the city. So I think, Local First is one of the sponsors of this event today, and they've done great things in trying to promote economic development in the rural areas of Arizona. And agriculture is very dependent. It's a codependency between agriculture and rural communities. And so I guess I would say at this point, mentioning some other things like labor later on in our discussion, but water and rural community health.
I think you make a great point. I mean, one thing I hope everybody takes away from this is agriculture is connected into what is the complex system for tourism as well. And Arizona without agriculture and the water that it provides is actually not going to help the tourism sector. It's going to collapse the tourism sector. So I don't think, and we've seen that over and over again in other countries. So I don't think that that they're competing, Stephanie. I think they go together. So your point about water is well taken. And if Arizona didn't have the water now, if Arizona didn't have the water it has now, I have a feeling we'd be in a much worse spot today with this COVID crisis. So I'm going to roll on to our second question, which I think is going to actually reiterate some of the points you've made on the first. And Barry, we'll be starting with you. COVID-19 underscored the importance of a strong and diverse food system. What systemic gaps have been the most glaring for you and your sector during this time, and what should we tackle first? Big question.
All right, thank you very much. I would start, it's actually a very difficult question because the first thing I'd like to say is, our manufacturers didn't have enough safety stock, for example, on shelf-stable products. But then again, who could have ever predicted? And then the fact that the entire community, or everyone basically in America, was making a run to the grocery stores, and we could not keep bathroom tissue on the shelf. And I still don't know where all that bathroom tissue has gone, but there's no way anything like that could have ever been predicted as well. I think this also left us in a situation where we were blindsided about the need for such a, quote, safer work environment, whether we're talking about, I don't call it social distancing, I really call it the physical distancing inside of a facility, the use of personal protection equipment, the extra sanitation that needs to take place. But with all of the steps that everyone has taken, I'm sure everybody has now developed a playbook that they can call on the next time something like this happens, which it very well could. But I will also, I think another way to answer this is probably from that labor standpoint. We didn't have the people inside of a warehouse to go and select the products from that warehouse to put on the trailers to send to the stores, because the demand for so many groceries was so high and just almost immediately. There's no way you could have ramped of labor force to suffice the needs of the stores. So what we did immediately was we reached out to companies who had their warehouses, who were servicing the restaurant industry, who were servicing the schools, who no longer were able to ship products to them. They had people so that they didn't really want to lay off. We took those people inside of our facilities for several weeks so that we would have enough of a labor force to take care of the stores. And so I think that, moving forward, as we prepare for something like this that may happen again, I think it's looking outside of our own industries and looking to others who will not be able to put people to work for a while, so that you will be able to go out and temporarily grab another labor workforce to bring in and help you. We've seen help from the National Guard during that time. We utilized help from other manufacturing and warehousing and shipping companies. But I think that's probably how I would best answer on how we should tackle this in the future.
Great, thank you. Charlene?
I think coming from a restaurant point of view, that we need direction, and we need steps and not really just guidelines. We also need more communication. I mentioned that I've just started doing takeout in the last few weeks. I just cannot see right now how a restaurant can be open without more systems in place, without more information, without more guidelines, and just letting people decide what they're going to do, how they're going to proceed, how they're going to keep the consumer safe, how they're going to be able to move product and I think that we really, again, like Barry mentioned, to really get more information and be more aware of what we need to have as far as like PPEs and also try to really understand. But me personally, and I have friends that are open, I feel like it's irresponsible to be open right now. I think we're watching restaurants that have been open a week around and closed back down. I don't see how that's going to be feasible for most open and close, and that it's better just to stay closed or to do takeout possibly. As we continue to figure out what we're supposed to be doing, and I don't think we should be figuring out. I think we should have more information told to us, more expectations, and more things that are responsibility to keep people safe and to be able to come back from this.
Great, thank you, Charlene. Billy?
So I think a number of things that have been said already are kind of echoed in our responses. The challenges we have seen is when everything shut down originally, our business evaporated almost overnight, a huge chunk of it. But there was an immediate demand from the retail sector, from like the Bashas group and people like that we've had the good fortune to work with. And so what we saw immediately was run on product, and growers, whether they're Arizona growers or even California growers, simply could not keep up with the demand of the needs. There are still in the supply chain, we see struggles, especially with prepackaged options we're seeing right now. A lot of school districts that we service are moving to these sort of to-go models in which for summer feeding purposes, people drive up and a to-go meal or a to-go series of meals are handed through the car door window. So that has had an incredibly challenging time keeping up with the demand, since that prepackaged carrots or apples or things of those natures. It's been a big challenge in keeping those in stock. I know when it comes to, the retail and the grocery sector, they had huge runs on your typical kind of normal commodity products. So your head lettuces and onions and kind of more standard items. So that was a huge challenge for us. And then speaking to Charlene's point, which I think is super valid, is, as restaurants start to scale back open in whatever capacity that looks like, ensuring that there's proper supply for what they need and what they're looking for to try and pivot into these new models is very challenging. So it's a daily sort of conversation that we're having as to what do we stock, how do we stock it, where can we get it, how can we ensure that it's meeting our quality standards while also ensuring that people have what they need as we kind of ramp up again. I think Charlene brought up some really good points. That there has at times been sort of a lack of guidance or advice, and so we all sort of do our best to develop those internally, which we think we're doing the best job possible. But obviously, everyone has a different viewpoint on these items. So those are things that we're kind of struggling with and working our way through on a daily basis here as this kind of continues to unfold.
Great, thank you, Billy. Scott?
Yes, thanks, Shane. We here along the border as importers interact with federal oversight agencies in a variety of ways. One of those being in respect to grading and quality inspections of certain items. USDA identifies 8 E-commodities as requiring inspection, and a lot of that, as well as tomatoes, over 90% of all tomatoes per the tomato suspension agreement, and those just began in early April. Much of that inspection is subcontracted to the Arizona Department of Agriculture, which maintains an office and an inspection crew here in Nogales. One of the systemic gaps that we saw was how the inspection agency here, the Arizona Department of Ag, interacts with industry in light of COVID-19 pandemic and looking for ways to ensure the safety of not only warehouse employees, but also those inspectors. Warehouse crews and employees tend to be stationary. They stay at one location. They go there every day, and whereas the inspectors rotate around town. There are over 100 facilities here in Nogales, Arizona that may service these commodities that require inspections. This whole process ramped up very quickly for us. We were looking at less than 1,000 truckloads being inspected in the month of March per these 8 E-commodities. In April with the tomatoes, we went up to 5,000. In May, over 6,000, and in June, over 9,000 truckloads needing inspection. So it was a very quick ramp up, and the dynamic of the inspection service with the rotation caused us a lot of concern because obviously you want to limit the movement and the potential transmission of illness. So, kind of learning on the go, on the run was an important part for us, and we're still trying to work out some of those issues while at the same time ensuring that our commodities meet the importation requirements, but at the same time ensuring the safety of our community. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott. Arnot?
Yeah, I think that initially, I think that the glaring weakness in our system in Arizona anyway was, and maybe the Southwest for that matter, was our inability to deliver products on a regular basis to those who needed it. And I think the greatest opportunity now as we look to change our direction is going to be, the increase in e-commerce, small farms reaching out and doing more to deliver directly to consumers. and I think the interesting aspect of this will be how is it done most sustainably? As we look at the Amazon model of put everything in a cardboard box with plastic wrappers and some cooling, whether it's ice or whatever, and how sustainable is that? And so I think there's a great opportunity for local growers to deliver directly. I thought it was interesting that Billy identified that he had a lack of ability to get product in, and yet we were going from an average of about 15 semi-loads of product being harvested daily to receiving orders from about 4 to 6 daily. So the rest of that product we could not even give away. We couldn't donate it because the other part of the food system delivery mechanism was shut down, and that's the donations to food banks who didn't have enough volunteers to either harvest or receive product and then deliver that to people in need. It's going to be really interesting to see how everybody adjusts to both the challenges and opportunities created by this situation. It definitely our system is set up to handle non-perishable items much better than perishable items. So I could see where Billy struggled there, but definitely on our side of the equation, here we are sitting on literally mountains of product and can't get rid of it, except for turning it back into the soil. And so I think that I think there's incredible opportunities, there's incredible challenges, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how we start delivering directly to consumers.
Great, thank you so much, Arnot. Stephanie.
Well, I think first let me say that I think I'm very proud of all of our different growers, no matter what size or what they were growing, in their response. And I think that the efficiencies and the technology and the conservation practices that have been put into place are what allowed us to basically continue farming through the crisis, but also to say, everybody calm down. There's plenty of food. We just have to figure out how to get it to you, which obviously from previous comments is the problem. But I am proud to say that agriculture supplying the food, having it ready, was not the problem, which would also be a huge thing to overcome if it had been. In terms of systemic issues, much of the changes that we've seen in agriculture that people ask me about all the time stem from labor. It's one of the largest costs in an ag operation is labor. And, a lot of what we grow is still labor intensive. But much of the specialization that has happened in agriculture has happened because of labor shortages, right? Mechanization, all of these different things, technologies. We're constantly trying to figure out how to overcome labor shortages. And so I think in this conversation, we need to remember that, if we want to maintain both a sustainable commercial agricultural production and local agricultural production, we have to have labor there. Otherwise, we'll continue to become more specialized, and you will see fewer local producers trying to maintain, their books in terms of their labor costs. And so I would say that labor is certainly a systemic issue that's been around for several decades. And, in the early 20th century, half of everyone lived in small towns, and 40% of those people worked in agriculture. Today, it's 2%. And so we have pivoted and we have adjusted, and I'm proud of that. But it also means that a more specialized system becomes much more intricate and more synchronized in terms of if you're growing one product, you have a very synchronized system of how to get it from the field to the consumer. And so I would say that definitely our labor supply, worker programs, immigration programs are a systemic problem. And the second thing I'll bring up that hasn't been said is consolidation. That is a problem in the livestock industry. It's not a bad thing for consolidation. It's not a bad thing to have greater efficiencies. But when you have so few outlets for a product that one disruption crashes the whole system, that means we don't have enough outlets. And so that's what we saw in the beef industry, and also in poultry and pork, because they're so integrated. The systems are so integrated now that just the slightest disruption can really throw things into a haywire system. And so I don't know what the answer is to that, but I do know that we need more outlets for the efficient supply that we provide in this country.
Great. This is Billy. I think that's it. Oh, can I just add on to that real quick? This is Billy talking. I think that that is a phenomenal point, and it's a vital call out. We see in produce distribution, consolidation is a huge thing, because what we see, and I think I'd be interested to hear how like Duncan and their teams feel about this. But what we see on our end is that having a consolidation point, or being able to consolidate these things, is of utmost importance, because costs and labor and transportation make sending vehicles and our trucks to go to different farms, it makes it really challenging, because we can't keep up with the demand or the labor or the transportation, and the cost to stop these trucks is so much. So I think that's a vital point, and I think that that's something on my list of things we could work as a community on better. How can we as a distributor make that more efficient? What can we do with our farming partners to consolidate a little more effectively and have multiple locations, so we can get that product and get these needs out to the public as efficiently as possible?
Right, and I think that'll roll us into our next question, actually. So as we answer that, keep it in mind. So the next question is, COVID-19 caused us to recognize the importance of local markets. Certainly we've seen this with the beef markets. So what are the next steps to ensure Arizona families know about our local agriculture, and how do we improve our locally processed food capacity in the state? And so I'll pass that to Barry first, please.
Thank you. We actually have a program we are working on right now, and I may have mentioned it just a little bit earlier. A group of Arizona cattle growers came to us a few months ago wanting to work with us. Excuse me. The problem was they didn't really have a process for getting their products to market in working with larger scale retailers like ourselves. So what we've done is, as we put a group of experts together to go visit them at their facilities, to help them to develop the processes in order to get their products to market quicker. Now, the key part of that, and really answering the question here is we've got to develop some marketing programs in order to educate the consumers on the opportunity of locally sourced products, of Arizona First products. And quite frankly, I think that'll be the easier part for us, with our group, with our marketing team. But getting the process in place first, and then working with both our marketing team and the marketing team from these different manufacturers and agricultural companies in order to educate consumers will be absolutely key to us. And we got many different ways that we can do that. We can do that through print advertising. We can do that through social media avenues. But that's what we are currently working on as we speak with this group of Arizona cattle growers. So there'll be much more to come on this in the very near future.
Wonderful. Thank you, Barry. Charlene?
I echo Barry's sentiments exactly. I think it's not wasting this opportunity we have to continue to educate consumers about our local products, whether it's the farmers markets. I was going to mention social media. Obviously, my platform has always been in the restaurant and the diner, and being able to have that opportunity to showcase ingredients from Arizona. We continue to do that with our takeout, but not having that personal interaction. We have to find different ways, whether it would be social media or just other ways to communicate to them about the importance of the local food scene and our wine and beef and our poultry and all of that we continue to push to educate our consumer. I agree with Barry 100%.
Yeah, we're blessed, Charlene, in the state. If it did not happen in the COVID crisis, but if we put a fence around Arizona and we could only eat what came from Arizona, we'd be pretty well off. Compare that to somewhere like Iowa, where you get to eat some some corn and some pork and a rangy old spent hen after she's finished laying eggs. So, we're really blessed in Arizona to have all that Mediterranean diet at our fingertips. Billy, over to you.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo what Barry and Charlene said as well. I think that advertising and getting it out there, I think a challenge is that, the March, April, May, June, this time frame, there's so much great product that's available, and we, because of this market situation, at least and I'd be interested to hear Charlene's thoughts on this. I mean, we struggled to get a lot of it out into restaurants simply because everything changed and it was turned on its head all of a sudden. I do think we try to focus our marketing efforts on highlighting those things and highlighting where farms come from and just doing the best that we can to get the news out there to people, and it's understand the importance and how it plays into the local economy is vital. So we try and do some similar things as the other two do.
Great, thank you so much. Scott.
Yes, thank you. We operate at a scale at the wholesale level where we see 1,000 or 2,000 semi-trucks, commercial loads crossing the border daily. So scaling down to the family level isn't always easy. Our industry made a variety of efforts to do that scale down and help communities in need, both locally in Santa Cruz County and also in conjunction with the Southern Arizona Food Bank and National Guard, getting fresh fruits and vegetables up to northeastern Arizona to the Hopi, Apache, Navajo people. Our aim was to connect our fruits and vegetables, our products, with families. The scale down is difficult at the wholesale level. We sell cases and boxes, and oftentimes a consumer might use 1 or 2 bell peppers. What do you do with a bushel? Or a bushel being a box that you kind of wrap your arm around of bell peppers, or 1 or 2 pieces of zucchini. What do you do with 50 to 80 pieces of zucchini? So that scale down is difficult at times just because of the way our industry operates. But we did make a variety of efforts to get fresh fruits and vegetables to communities in need, especially as we saw employment issues affecting different parts of the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Arnot.
So I think every time you have a challenge like this, it also creates opportunities. And as I alluded to earlier, I think you're going to start seeing more direct deliveries, possibly cooperatives of created to, what Billy was talking about and Charlene, where growers get together, small growers get together, and instead of trying to sell, a bushel or a box or a carton of zucchini to individual families, that you break it down and put different, just as a CSA would, where you're putting together family-sized proportions of each thing. Those are the opportunities and the challenges, right? How do you get that system set in place in a short term? The opportunities are for those who find a way and can make those deliveries, set up regional delivery systems, distribution systems. I think you're going to see how important food hubs can be, and I'm actually excited about the opportunities that are created. Unfortunately, it was created by and the realization that they're needed by this this terrible challenge.
Great, thank you, Stephanie.
Well, I think I find this question to be very interesting. I think that it has been mentioned before by several of the other participants in terms of distribution. Food distribution is a huge issue, right? In terms of, you could have every commercial farmer in Arizona, implement some kind of locally grown portion of their business, but if they can't get it to where it's supposed to go because that distribution system is already sort of integrated into a pathway that's hard to get into, that's going to be a barrier, right, in the future, and trying to make our local food system more robust. And quality control is important, right? We've often heard that at the farm gate when you try to, like a great retail line like Bash's, selling, Arizona First or the the Arizona grown products, that's always an issue, and it's of no fault of anybody on either end, but it's just a logistics issue, right? So I think that's something that have to be worked on, but also building consumer demand. That's a big part of it. I'll put a plug in for two avenues for folks to find local growers. And I know Local First has a very robust Good Food Finder, and Arizona Farm Bureau has a Fill Your Plate, which can connect consumers directly to local growers. But even when you build consumer demand, like we have seen in this short period of time, the question is it sustainable? And the fact is that not every consumer is the same. So there is definitely a demand, and there is a lane for locally grown, locally sourced products, which turns out to be very important, as we've said, during the pandemic. But there's also a lot of consumers out there who would find it very difficult to access products in that way. And the fact is that it's local food systems are labor intensive, as I've said, and they're can be more expensive just because of economy of scale. And so I just think that as we build our local demand, that we also recognize the importance of the diversity of consumer that we have, and maintain the sustainability for both of those lanes, whether it's a local demand or like for instance, just use our operation for example. We have a ranch. We've been there for 135 plus years. We've had to diversify our operation to make it through certain challenges, right? Well, during COVID-19, we had so many people calling us that wanted to buy beef direct, and they had no idea that it essentially takes 2 years to make a hamburger. And so consumer education, I think, would also help in building consumer demand for locally grown food, is continuing on this effort to educate the consumer on how long exactly does it take, what goes into growing that food, because then I think it also gives them an appreciation for the value of that food. And so at the local level, to sustain that demand, folks have to appreciate the value of that food and the cost that goes into producing it, so that they're willing to pay a higher cost, because frankly it is a higher cost. And so I guess that's the points that I would make in terms of building up more of a local market.
We do have a question from the group as well, or from one of the participants that I think dovetails nicely on this. And that question is, how can we synchronize to prioritize building infrastructure that supports the movement of local product, especially perishable product, in a more sustainable fashion? What does that look like? Is that local aggregation hubs, local processing facilities, distribution, et cetera?
So
Billy, I'll chime in here.
Billy, maybe if I could just say, question 5 is actually
Sure.
very similar. I want to throw that into question 5 too. I'll throw question 5 in here too, so that we can skip that, because I'm looking at the time and we're going to be pretty tight on time. So just in addition to that, I think in context of that, the question 5 we have is what is needed to make it easier for you to distribute food, especially in state, but out of state as well. I think those are probably connected questions, so keep that in mind, please. And let's run through the panel on that question we received and combine it with question 5. So yes, Billy, did you want to start, and I'll rotate round to Barry after you.
Sure, yeah. I think kind of echoing what Stephanie said, we're not farmers, we're simply distributors, but we know, and I think Stephanie said, farmers in Arizona do incredible work. They grow incredible product. They have a commitment to every standard that we as a distributor could want and could ever ask for. So we're incredibly blessed and lucky in Arizona to have access to those things that many people simply don't have access to in other states. I think getting it out and getting it through distributors like us, and there's obviously clearly a variety of different distribution mechanisms, so it's not solely just us. But getting it out there is vital to not only advertising it, but to ensuring that the public understands the huge benefits we have living in Arizona. Personally, from a distributor's perspective, this is going to be one-sided just from me, but I do think that the concept of a hub or the concept of a place where we can consolidate in one location and send one truck to pick up is vital. It would be vital for us to ensure that, hey, we can pick up from these 10 local farms orders at one location. That ensures that we can kind of speak to ensuring efficiency. I think Stephanie spoke earlier also about how there's an increased cost for local farmer, local product. That is correct, but that would be a way we can minimize that impact into the community and get more of that product out. I think local processing facilities, as the question was asked in the Q&A, would also be vital. We have seen, just from our arena, a huge demand for pre-processed items, much more than ever before, from both the restaurant sector as well as the school sector, and there are not that many processors in the Phoenix or Arizona market, however you want to say it, that can offer those items. So we as a distributor then are forced to go outside of state. So I think if we could come to a way to kind of work on those, the benefits could be huge across the system. I have to think that it would help, farmers and distribution people like us, retail as well. That's just my 2 cents on the thing, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Great, thank you. Let's go to Barry on that same 2 questions together.
Thank you. I believe with this type of question, deferring to somebody like Billy to answer it is much more appropriate. I will say that we distribute food probably in a little bit different way, but on a very large scale as well. But what would make it easier for us? First of all, we had to look back. We have to look back on that time when this pandemic started. We needed resources. There were people that were needed, whether they were selectors to pick that product out of the warehouses, to palletize it. We needed people to operate forklifts. We needed extra tractors and trailers. They weren't available when we looked within our own yard. We had to go out and borrow from companies like Shamrock when we had these great needs. Shamrock had a surplus, and therefore we worked real close with them. So I think, once again, this kind of gets back to building great relationships within our industries in order to make it easier in the future for when something like this happens.
Great, thank you, Barry. Charlene.
One second. Thank you. I think both Billy and Barry have covered it. I think that Billy also mentioned prior to that about the cost and labor of transportation involved. I know for myself, being a small business restaurant, I run all over town. I can go from Litchfield Park out to Levine, over to Mesa, just to pick up certain things that might not be available at a farmer's market, or not the day I'm able to pick them up. If there was something like a food hub or a place where a central location, it would be a lot less taxing. Also, I think of the farmers. I think one in particular that I use that is in northern Arizona. That usually comes down to a farmer's market that is not doing that because of safety precautions, and he would have that opportunity to be able to drop off his stuff and have it safely distributed to restaurants, and we're missing that possibly. I also think with extending the value, though, we need to, for me, it's just important that the guests understand the value of food and the cost of food, and not expecting food to be so cheap and inexpensive, and that we have to pay for it, and we have to pay for great product, and know that it comes, that there is a value, whether it's providing work or covering the labor. My business, just so much, and also just good for them, but there's just so much value to paying for food rather than paying so little for it.
So thank you. The decommoditization of these products is really important, Charlene. Thank you so much. Scott.
Thank you. Well, so much of the cost to the end consumer, to the end user of fruits and vegetables, agricultural items, is freight, the cost of movement, the cost of delivery. So improving networks and improving hubs is crucial to keeping products in line with what the consumer is able to spend. I can tell you, as a shipper, oftentimes I'll see items that we've imported and sold in the supermarkets here, and I know that they went to Southern California first and then came back into Arizona. So an effort to keep that logistical activity in state is so important. On that note, getting products out of state and connecting Arizona with other parts of the Western United States is also very important. We've been major advocates of the Interstate 11 concept in the Intermountain West to create more efficient freight ways away from the California and the coastal corridor. And on the more local level, we've dedicated a huge amount of time and energy to the State Route 189 modernization project, which will increase efficiencies and safety for connecting the Mariposa Port of Entry, where all commercial trucks cross the border, to Interstate 19, which connects Nogales to Tucson. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott. Arnot.
I think it'd be fascinating to see what we can do as far as working with the federal government at the USDA level of no more price support programs, things like that. But as far as specialty crop programs, to identify the need for distribution systems and what kind of grants could be available there for micro distribution systems, where you could also have educational opportunities. And, imagine a distribution system in downtown Phoenix where Billy could send his truck over to receive, farm cooperative, numbers of different types of produce and other, whether it's, cheeses, grapes, whatever those items are that are locally produced, that you have a place that you can go to. Charlene has a place that she can go to. The growers and producers have a place, multiple places where they can go to deliver these products. And by the way, Stephanie, no, I'm not going to take 60 million pounds of baby leaf product and start moving it into the Arizona market, but a percentage of what we grow can be delivered to and should be, instead of everything going out of state to different processors, we should probably start making some of our product available to the local market. And figure out a way at how we can reach people who really do need and want those products. Billy can come by and pick it up. Charlene can come by and pick it up if we can find a way to put together distribution systems in a local and centrally located area. I think there's, once again, I've said it before, I think there's a huge opportunity here.
Yeah, this idea of networks within networks is something that all robust, complex systems share, no matter where they are and what they're doing. Stephanie.
Yeah, I guess I'll speak to, so many great things have been said. I'll speak to kind of circle back a little bit and speak to the livestock issue in terms of beef production, which is such a large industry in the state. I know certainly what would help get more local beef to families in Arizona and to restaurants would be more processing facilities. We recently heard on a call with the Department of Agriculture that, at one point we had over 30 official facilities, and now we're down to 7. And so I know that a lot of folks that are in the beef industry, or even raising, if they're raising lambs, pork, local growers, when COVID happened and we were seeing the shortage in the meat supply chain, extremely difficult to get into a packing house or a slaughter facility. Even folks where you normally would have taken animals, it hit right at the same time as half of our state fair or half of our county fairs. And those kids need to get in there and get their animals processed. And so we saw this kind of convergence of fair animals with commercial animals, with the demand for boxed protein going through the roof. But if you don't have somewhere that's inspected to safely, pass that on to the consumer, that meat's not going anywhere. So I would just add to all of the other comments, the processing facility part on the livestock side would be a hurdle to overcome going into the future in terms of getting product direct.
Great, Stephanie. I think this leads ironically back to question 4. And just to keep a note on the time, everybody, 19 minutes to go. So question 4 is, what is the importance of expanding value-added locally processed food capacity in our state to your business and or to Arizona agriculture in general, which I think is what you actually were just talking about, Stephanie. But Barry, go ahead.
This is highly important for us, but I will add to it, not at the expense of a high cost of goods, because we still have to pass on value to our consumers as well. But this is priority, and we're reaching out to local companies in order to try to create some exclusive relationships. One of the things you have to remember is not only did this affect food, this affected non-food tremendously, and people today even though they're able to find all of the bathroom tissue that they need, we've got that back in stock. There's still certain things they can't hardly find. And I'll use one example, baby wipes, for example. So many of the raw materials come from out of the country for baby wipes, but we found one Arizona supplier that not a whole lot of companies knew about who produced baby wipes. I bought everything they had. And we've been the only retailer that maintained the status of keeping baby wipes during this entire pandemic, and not at an exaggerated price. They were still at a good value. So to me, it's all about not only just creating good relationships, but also working to create some exclusive relationships where Arizona companies can work together. And this can actually be a good sustainable business model going forward.
Very quick question, Barry, because people might be wondering, what were the baby wipes made from?
They're made from a spunlace type material, where most of them are actually, excuse me, most of that raw material comes from China, unfortunately. There are a few companies down in Mexico who produce the raw materials, and we were able to get some of that up here to this Phoenix company. But also, it's not just the raw materials for the product itself, it's most of the packaging for these items comes from China also. So, part of my message is I have to have a series of weekly calls with the vendor community. Part of my message to everybody now is that if you've even thought about having a more vertically integrated program, I mean, there's not a better time to do so now, instead of being so highly dependent on these products having to come from overseas.
Right. Thank you very much, Charlene.
I think I actually just answered it the last time I was on, but going back again to educating my guests on the value of food, and not having them ask a question like what a $10 blade of cucumbers looks like, that they know that they're going to get something that is of value, and that it also includes giving my staff a fair wage, paying a farmer what they deserve, the farmer paying their staff what they deserve. It rolls back into making sure that everybody understands the value of food, and that's my thought on that.
Great, thank you, Billy.
I personally think Charlene said it perfectly. I don't really have anything to add to this one, because I think that she summarized it perfectly. I think there was, for a long time, a race to the bottom when it came to price, and we did a lot of conversations with our clients and saying, listen, we want to be as competitive as possible, but good product, good food, there is value in that, and it costs something. And I think that we have to educate the public to understand that that there's value in that.
Right. Thank you very much, Scott.
I would just reiterate the importance of logistical hubs. There's a area along the West Valley, West Phoenix area, where you have a lot of warehousing, and trying to keep a lot of that movement in state as opposed to outsourcing it to Southern California or other areas. We have a burgeoning population, a strong economy here. So let's keep the movement in state, and at the same time reduce cost to the end user.
Great, thank you, Scott. Arnot.
I was going to expand on what Stephanie mentioned about education. Well, everybody's talked about it, actually. There's a natural kind of development where there's a decentralizing, just reducing consolidation, at least in the leafy greens industry, where we're kind of moving out of the Yuma, Salinas, deal and moving into more regional processing facilities. And I do believe that in addition to Yuma, that Central Arizona can be creates another processing opportunity. And there are many other regional opportunities across the United States that some of the same companies are taking advantage of just to become more local. So it's happening through a natural progression, if you will. Pricing is going to be a challenge. Central Arizona is one of the toughest markets in the country. I think it's top 5 as far as cheapest food. So this is a difficult place to create opportunities for high quality product that is priced a little bit higher. Once again, that'll require an intense educational system. So the opportunities are there, as I've alluded to. It's going to take a little bit of groundwork to get it accomplished.
Yeah, Arnot, thanks for raising the profile of Central Arizona. It's already a food processing center for the country, and so yeah, that makes a lot of sense there. Stephanie.
I'll just defer back to my previous answer.
Okay, great. Okay, everybody, we're on to question 6. 13 minutes to go. So it proved difficult for food producers to pivot from restaurant to grocery during the crisis. Why was that? That's part A. Part B is some food producers pivoted from restaurant to CSA models successfully, but others didn't. Why? I'll start off with Billy. I think this is right in your sweet spot here, Billy.
Well, as a distributor, we're not producing, we're just simply distributing. What we saw, and I don't want to speak in a broad term here because this is potentially highly just anecdotal to our experience, but what we saw is that restaurants typically buy differently than retail experiences. And Barry and I think Charlene could kind of show the dichotomy between the two. So as a distributor with a primary specialty in restaurants, we were geared towards restaurant-oriented items and restaurant-oriented patch sizes. When the pivot needed to happen to all of a sudden shift to retail or increasing school or increasing prepackaged options or things of that nature, the grower relationships and the farm relationships we had in place, many of them were so used to, through no fault of their own, because they would do the same thing, we're so used to the restaurant model of it, that shifting to that was a huge shock to the system, to their system. And again, this is anecdotal just in my experience. So it was very challenging. And because sometimes things are grown in different ways, sometimes pack sizes vary depending on who the end user is. So it was a shock, and there still are a little bit of aftershocks here and there on as we sort of regulate and get back to some sense of normal.
Great, thank you, Charlene.
Well, I've already actually done the grocery model. When we moved locations about 8 years ago, we had a small little store we called the Bodega, and we sold pretty much only local in there. But it was also well before a lot of the people that we were showcasing were either just in a farmer's market or not able to sell online. I think of like Hayden Mills 8 years ago or Noble Bread 8 years ago. And it just didn't seem like, first of all, it was a shock to have to close down your restaurant in the middle of March. It's your busiest month of the entire year. It's when you save all of your money to get through the summer. And to think about possibly going in a direction of grocery back into that sort of model just didn't seem like a very good business decision. I was left with a walk-in full of food, beyond full of food, hundreds of pounds of things, and quite a bit of it went to staff. There already were individuals, I think of Tracy Dempsey, who has a retail outlet, and I took a lot of my produce to her, or a lot of pre-made sauces and things like that to her, where she was able to distribute it out, either putting it into a CSA box as an add-on to sell. I've used, for example, purple snow peas. I had pickled 15 gallons of those, but still had about 50 pounds left, and she was able to take those and sell them for me. I just think it was really communication and working together, and not kind of adding another wheel to everything else that was going on. And I mentioned when we first started the CSAs, and the food producers that moved over to that CSA model that had never, some of them doing it before, but some of them never doing it before, and how, yes, it did move out the food, and yes, you did go to a farmer's market and you saw the line almost to the street and onto the street of people waiting in line to get a CSA box, and it may look successful, but then talking to them about the fact that, again, it was 4 times as much work for half the amount of money, and they were just trying to, and they are still just trying to survive because restaurants are not up and running. So those are just the parts that I've been able to see and experience on my own.
Great, thank you very much. Billy.
Cool. I tipped this one off, so I think I have gone with mine just a second ago. Maybe Barry is who you're talking to?
Oh, sorry, Billy, you kicked off Barry. Sorry,
yeah.
You swapped me around there. Yeah. Sorry, Barry, go ahead.
Okay, thanks a lot. I will say that as consumer dollars shifted, as their food dollars shifted away from restaurants as they closed and to the grocery store, to the supermarket industry, I will tell you that, we had people like Billy's company who were calling us. We were already doing business with them, but we started doing more immediately. I don't know who was calling who first, whether or not we were calling them or they were calling us. But what we were finding is I'm speaking more to the distributor standpoint, is those companies who were selling to the restaurants and the schools like Shamrock, Cisco, and Billy's company, our phones were ringing off the hook with each other because they wanted to, push some business our way. We needed those products. So we had the manufacturers and the distributors reaching out to us directly. So it really wasn't a problem for us. But, for those companies who didn't make that pivot well, it'd be hard for me to understand, and I'd probably have to defer that to the rest of the panel to hear from them.
Great, thank you. Jumping back to Scott.
Thank you. Well, I think in strong economic conditions, you tend to see a little over half of all fruit and vegetable consumption at the restaurant or food service level. And on somewhat weaker situations, it flips back towards retail. We saw a lot of enthusiasm at the retail level, but it wasn't enough to absorb all of the crops that had been planted and traditionally get directed towards food service. So what happened? Well, in the end, a lot of items didn't get packaged, didn't get shipped. It doesn't make sense to put the time and effort into harvesting and packing if you're not going to have an out for that item. So we're not able to harvest all of the crops. We saw more enthusiasm at the retail level, especially on certain items. We've seen a very strong market, for instance, on watermelons for the last couple of months, all the way into the Memorial Day holiday and moving past it. So certain items have seen very good conditions, but overall, the switch, the pivot, there just wasn't enough capacity at the retail level to absorb everything that traditionally gets marketed.
Great, thank you, Arnot.
Sorry, I should have already been unmuted. I think we're going to see, and what we're going to be working on is communicating with growers smaller and larger, communicating with distributors, communicating with coolers. In other words, it's easier to start reaching out and creating cooperatives, creating vertically integrated opportunities instead of creating it internally, but looking at it externally. I believe we have the technology to take our food safety trace back and work with multiple entities and still have that be in place. The technology exists, we're utilizing it presently, and I think that Billy brought it up earlier, that food safety is a huge issue, and so having the ability to trace back is something that we can bring along. But once again, it gets back to the opportunities, and I think that these things the puzzle pieces are floating around out there, and they're waiting for someone to grab them and bring them back in. Imagine Steph having a place to deliver a certain percentage of her product into local markets. We have and yet our market is usually much larger and fewer people. Now we're talking about smaller amounts of sales to a lot of other and more diverse buyers. And I think that's the way that some of us ought to be going. And once again, the opportunity's there, challenge is there to make it happen.
Great, Stephanie.
Yeah, I think kind of what I observed, and this was just, again, as was said before, it's kind of anecdotal, but I think the reason that some folks were able to pivot more quickly when that happened, again, like I said, at Farm Bureau, our first immediate reaction was, oh my gosh, what about our direct farmers? What's going to happen with all of a sudden now all these restaurants are closed and farmers markets are closed? Very resilient, those farmers pivoted very quickly. I think one of the reasons, and that's not without pain. I'm not saying they didn't. not saying they didn't feel the pain of that, but they were able to pivot, and I think part of that speaks to the advantage of loyalty, customer loyalty, and relationships with your customers, right? I think that they were able to find the avenue to those folks who knew their products, and so there's definitely an advantage for local agriculture in that sense that more commercial agriculture doesn't have. But again, the packaging, that turned out to be a huge issue, and I'm sure that our folks in the dairy industry are trying to think about how to avoid a lot of the dumping of milk happen because of the system being so synchronized and streamlined in terms of, oh my gosh, all this milk that would have gone in school cartons is now got to go somewhere else. And so I think that's part of it, and I'm sure there are a lot of folks working on how that pivot can happen. But I want to reiterate something that Arnot said. Food safety is a ginormous issue, and at some point we're going to have this kind of intersection of trying to build local food supply and also the food safety issue, which some might say, well, how can a local food supply be less safe than a national food supply? But because of the technologies that we have in place and the tracking systems that we have, and these systems that are totally integrated, makes for a very safe food supply and tracking where we have issues and just oversight. So I think that's going to have to continue to be a consideration when building up. Again, we have basically a binary food system, which I think should be, can't be overstated how important that is. And so those things are kind of going to come to a head in terms of trying to manage consumer concerns in both systems.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. I'm afraid, and I feel bad about this because I'd love to continue this conversation for another hour, but we're just about to run out of time. We've got 1 minute to go. I would just like to end this by saying I think we could continue this conversation. There's so many important things that we've only just touched on. And I just want to end by thanking again our hosts, Arizona Farm Bureau Federation, Local First Arizona, and Squire Patton Bog. Thank you so much for hosting this today. I want to thank our speakers, incredible group of people, very articulate, very clear, so many messages. I would have liked to end by asking everybody to just give us a single sound bite as a takeaway, but we're just going to run out of time. I'm sorry to do that. Maybe there's another way that Farm Bureau can facilitate that. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for attending. Thank you for your time, for listening to everybody today. Our food system is part of our national security system, and I think I want to thank all those, especially in the front line of delivering food to everybody. I think they've always been our heroes, and now the whole country can see what heroes everybody is from farm to fork, and that's been maybe one silver lining, maybe the only one coming out of this COVID crisis. So thank you all for your time today, and I'm going to have to sign off, and I'm sure everybody else is too. So thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.